Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you the moments that break us and the ones that put us back together. What would you do if your 16-year-old daughter was told there was no room for her at the family Christmas table? Not metaphorically, literally. No chair, no place. No one stood up for her, not even her own blood. This isn't just a story about one painful holiday. It's about the quiet betrayals we excuse for the sake of peace, the generational wounds we inherit and pass down, and the moment one mother decides finally that silence is no longer love. Stay with us, because what begins as heartbreak becomes something far more powerful, a reckoning. And by the end, you might find yourself asking how many times you've been erased or how many times you looked away. Let's begin. Rachel Monroe's hands had memorized the rhythm of the ER, pulse, pressure, triage, repeat. But nothing in her 12 years as a trauma nurse prepared her for the silence of her own living room that Christmas night. The room still smelled faintly of peppermint and pine from the artificial tree she and Chloe had decorated 3 weeks prior. A few unopened gifts sat beneath it, mostly sentimental: photo albums, a secondhand film camera, a silver bracelet. None of them could undo the truth of what had happened. Outside, Ridgeview's winter air wrapped the city in quiet frost, but inside Rachel's chest was a storm she couldn't name. She sank into the couch, still wearing scrubs, the edges of her ID badge digging into her collarbone. The house was still. Too still. Chloe's bedroom door was shut, the strip of light beneath it unwavering. Rachel had told herself she could wait to confront her family, that she would sit down, craft a letter, maybe even a calm conversation. But the image of her daughter sitting alone on Christmas Day with a microwaved baked potato and a paper plate of reheated ham, while her grandparents toasted fine wine and laughed with Amanda's guests, it had clawed its way into Rachel's mind and refused to leave. They told Chloe there was no room at the table. Chloe, who had wrapped every present by hand. Chloe, who wore the green sweater she had carefully chosen to match the table decor. Chloe, who had made the sweet potato casserole from her great-grandmother's recipe and even offered to help in the kitchen without being asked. Rachel clenched her jaw. No room wasn't a logistical oversight. It was a message, one her daughter had received loud and clear. Rachel's parents, David and Barbara Monroe, weren't monsters, not in the obvious way. They hosted charity auctions, donated the church, kept a spotless colonial home 30 minutes north of the city. But they measured worth in presentation, in career prestige, in conformity. Rachel had defied all three when she married young, became a nurse, and then divorced. Amanda, of course, did none of that. She married Eric Benton, a hedge fund manager with a last name that opened doors. Their children, Mason and Bella, were practically raised to perform success. Tennis trophies, ballet recitals, private school Latin. Chloe, by contrast, liked solitude, silence, and light. She saw the world in shadows and color, in the angle of a branch, the curve of someone's frown. She was art in a family obsessed with symmetry. Rachel had always known there was an imbalance, but she convinced herself it wasn't enough to warrant confrontation. Not until tonight. She stood suddenly and walked to Chloe's door. Her hand hovered above the doorknob for a moment before she knocked softly. "Yeah?" came the sleepy reply. Rachel opened the door. Chloe was curled up on the bed, still in her Christmas clothes, mascara faintly smudged beneath her eyes. Her phone lay on her chest like a small, unanswered prayer. The silver bracelet with the empty charm links glinted on her wrist. "I thought you might be asleep," Rachel said gently. "I was," Chloe murmured. "Kind of." Rachel sat at the edge of the bed, silent for a beat. "I know what happened. I mean, all of it. I should have known sooner. I'm sorry." Chloe's throat bobbed. "You had to work. It's not your fault." "No, I let them do this to you. For years, I let them make you feel like you were less. And I pretended that silence was strength." Rachel's voice broke. "That ends tonight." Chloe looked over, her voice barely audible. "Are you going to say something to them?" Rachel nodded. "I already did. I left them a message. And tomorrow, we're not going over there. Not for brunch. Not for any fake reconciliation. They don't get to decide your worth. Not anymore." There was a pause. Then Chloe's voice, small but defiant. "What if They don't care. Rachel met her eyes. Then we stopped pretending they ever did. A long silence settled between them before Chloe whispered, "Can I sleep in your bed tonight?" Rachel nodded and reached out. Chloe crawled under the blanket beside her, curling against her mother's side like she used to during thunderstorm nights. Rachel kissed her forehead, but her eyes stayed open long after Chloe drifted to sleep. What Chloe didn't know, what Rachel hadn't told her, was that earlier that evening, her phone had buzzed while she was in the break room. A message from Amanda. "You're overreacting. Chloe's 16. She's old enough to handle some awkwardness. We didn't plan for the extra guests. You should have been there if it mattered that much." Rachel had stared at the message for several minutes, her fingers shaking. But she hadn't responded. Not yet. Because what she needed to say to Amanda and to her parents was too large for a text. Later, as Rachel stood by the window watching snow fall over the rooftops, she realized something else. The betrayal wasn't just about Christmas. It was about every silent dismissal, every forced smile, every time Chloe's art was ignored while Mason's tennis trophies were paraded around like gold. The system had been rigged from the start, and tomorrow, Rachel would burn it to the ground. What would you do if the people meant to love your child the most made them feel invisible? Have you ever mistaken keeping the peace for keeping your silence? Because in the quiet hours after midnight, Rachel Monroe made a decision that would change everything. And not everyone would survive the fallout unscathed. In part 2, a mother becomes a storm. Rachel woke up with the kind of clarity that doesn't come gently. It lands like glass breaking in the chest. Sunlight leaked through the blinds, but it didn't warm her. She lay still for a moment, Chloe's steady breath beside her, then slipped out of bed like someone preparing for battle. There was no plan beyond this. Truth. Truth without diplomacy, without filters, without excuses. For the first time in her life, Rachel Monroe would speak not as a daughter, not even as a nurse, but as a mother protecting her child from the quiet violence of being ignored. While coffee brewed, she packed a box, the garland her mother had insisted she take to make the apartment feel more festive. The hand-stitched stocking labeled Chloe, made years ago but always hung slightly out of sight. The glittered pine cones that matched her parents' pristine dining room but never quite fit their warmth. All of it went into the box like evidence. When Chloe emerged, hair tousled and still in pajamas, she stopped mid-step. "Are you packing Christmas?" Rachel turned to her daughter, her voice even. "We're returning it." There was a pause. "You don't have to do all this for me, Mom." Rachel smiled gently. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because of you." That's different. They ate pancakes at the kitchen table with mismatched plates and syrup from a half-empty bottle. Rachel didn't tell Chloe that she'd taken a personal day for the first time in 2 years. She didn't mention that she'd received 2 missed calls from her father and a string of texts from Amanda, each more defensive than the last. Chloe was laughing at something the cat had done outside the window, and Rachel didn't want to pierce the moment. But the peace was temporary, and Rachel knew it. They met at Birch and Bean Cafe at 11 a.m. sharp. Amanda arrived first, oddly subdued in jeans and a puffer jacket. Her eyes searched Rachel's, then Chloe's, as if unsure which of them would speak first. Rachel didn't offer warmth, but she didn't withhold it either. She simply nodded toward the empty seat. "Thanks for coming." Amanda glanced at Chloe, then down at her coffee. "I owe you both an apology, a real one." Rachel waited. "I should have spoken up. When Mom asked you to leave, Chloe, I froze. I didn't want to ruin Christmas." Chloe's voice, when it came, was quieter than expected, but firm. "You didn't ruin Christmas. You watched someone else do it." Amanda winced. Rachel let the words hang in the air like frost. For once, her daughter didn't need rescuing. The door chimed again. David and Barbara Monroe entered. Her father clutching a wool coat over one arm, her mother pristine as always, lipstick the color of restraint. They paused at the sight of Amanda, and Rachel knew then that they hadn't been told she would be there. Good. The table was too small for such a heavy conversation, and yet somehow perfect. "Thank you for meeting," David said. He looked at Chloe first. "What happened on Christmas? I didn't realize until later. I'm sorry." Barbara sat, her posture impeccable, her hands folded like she was preparing for a televised apology. "It was a misunderstanding," she began. "We didn't expect Amanda to bring so many." Rachel held up her hand. "Mom, please don't explain it away. You didn't ask your guests to leave. You asked my daughter." "I didn't ask her to leave. You made her feel like she didn't belong. Again." Rachel's voice cracked slightly. "You've been doing it for years, and I let you. I told myself it was easier to keep the peace, that Chloe could handle it. But she shouldn't have to. She should be safe in her own family." There was a shift at the table then. Not dramatic, just enough for Barbara to exhale, tight, clipped. "What do you want from us?" Rachel looked at Chloe, then Amanda, and finally her parents. "Respect, accountability. You can't keep hurting us and calling it tradition." David nodded slowly. "We want to do better." Rachel believed him, partly. He had always been more capable of guilt than action. But Barbara, she was a fortress. Yet when she finally turned to Chloe, her expression, though strained, cracked open just slightly. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words, fragile as glass. It wasn't perfect. But Chloe didn't flinch. She looked her grandmother in the eye and said, "If it happens again, we won't come back." There it was, not an ultimatum, a truth. That evening, as Rachel and Chloe returned home, the box of decorations still untouched in the trunk, something unexpected waited on their doorstep. A thick envelope. No name, no return address, just taped to the door. Rachel opened it inside. A set of family photos from previous holidays, old prints, clearly copied from originals. In every photo, Chloe was cropped, either partially, subtly, or entirely. A cold sweat bloomed across Rachel's spine. One image after another, someone had made a conscious choice. Beneath the photos, a handwritten note. "You should be more grateful. Some people don't belong in every picture." Rachel's breath caught. What would you do if your child's erasure wasn't just emotional, but intentional? Because sometimes the real betrayal isn't what they did in front of you, it's what they erased when you weren't looking. And now, Rachel must decide how far she's willing to go to expose the truth and who might be trying to silence her. Part 3 is where everything unravels. The photographs lay in a loose pile on the kitchen table, like quiet accusations. One by one, Rachel turned them over, her fingers trembling. Christmas 2017, everyone gathered around the piano, Amanda laughing with a glass of wine, David mid-song. Chloe's sweater sleeve barely visible at the edge of the frame. Thanksgiving 2019, Mason and Bella posing with a pumpkin centerpiece. Chloe had carved that pumpkin herself, Rachel remembered. But in the photo, she wasn't there. It was the kind of thing you dismiss once, maybe twice. Poor framing, coincidence, but not 6 years in a row. Not this many. Chloe sat across from her, legs folded under her, silent. She hadn't said much since they found the envelope. She hadn't needed to. The tension between them and the stack of photos spoke enough. Rachel tried to rationalize, maybe this was someone's cruel prank. But the handwriting on the note had a familiarity Rachel couldn't quite place, like a whisper from someone she used to know, someone who knew where to press. "I thought I was just imagining it," Chloe finally said, voice soft. "I always felt like I wasn't really there. I mean, I was there, obviously, but when I looked back through their photo albums, I just assumed maybe I didn't smile or maybe I moved or I don't know." Rachel swallowed hard. "No one deserves to be erased, especially not you." Chloe gave a tired shrug. "Maybe I didn't matter enough to be remembered." "No," Rachel said, louder than she meant. Her voice cracked. "They made you believe that. I let them. I let all of it slide for too long. But this is not going to end with a quiet shrug. It ends with a reckoning." Later that day, Rachel stood on her parents' doorstep with the envelope in hand and fury in her blood. Chloe had begged not to come, so Rachel went alone. The door opened with its usual soft creak, revealing Barbara in a cream sweater set, her expression unreadable. Rachel didn't speak. She handed her mother the envelope. Barbara opened it, one finger hesitating before she drew out the first photo. Rachel watched her face, searching for a flicker of guilt, a flash of recognition, a tremble of shame. But Barbara simply stared, then looked up. "I don't understand. Why are you showing me these?" "You really don't see it?" Rachel asked. Barbara studied the images again, slower this time. They're just family photos. Without Chloe, Rachel said, voice shaking, she was there every year. She was right there, Mom, but someone went out of their way to cut her out, over and over again, and now someone's mailing us copies like a threat. Barbara's eyes narrowed. What are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing, I'm asking. Who took these? Who edited them? Who thought Chloe should be cropped out of our lives? Because someone in this family did, and I need to know who. Barbara pressed her lips into a thin line. You always think there's some grand conspiracy. Maybe someone framed these badly. Maybe the prints were just poor. Rachel stepped back. It wasn't an accident. These were printed, reprinted, and mailed to our home. With a note. You want to talk about grace and family values? This isn't grace. This is calculated. I didn't send those photos, Barbara snapped. And if you're suggesting I tried to erase your daughter, she's your granddaughter, Rachel cut in, and she's been trying to earn a place in this family since she could hold a crayon. You know what's worse than what you did on Christmas? The fact that when she left that night, hurt, humiliated, no one followed. No one called. No one even noticed. David appeared behind Barbara, having heard the last few words. Rachel? I don't want apologies, she said, turning to him. I want the truth. Who did this, and why has Chloe never mattered to this family the way Amanda's kids do? Barbara flinched, a rare crack in her porcelain control. Because she reminds me of you, she said suddenly, her voice brittle. Too much heart, too many questions, not enough conformity. Rachel blinked, stunned. For years, she had chased her mother's approval like it was a prize she'd almost won. And here it was, the truth. Cold, small, bitter. You resented her, Rachel whispered, for being like me. Barbara didn't answer. David looked down. Rachel turned to leave, heart racing. Don't call. Don't visit. Unless you're ready to own what you've done and change it from the root. Otherwise, this, she gestured between them, is over. That night, Rachel and Chloe lit candles on their small balcony. No photos, no forced smiles, just the two of them and the soft hum of the city below. Rachel told Chloe everything about the photos, the confrontation, even her mother's admission. Chloe listened without comment, then reached for her camera. I want to start a project, she said, eyes reflecting the candlelight. It's called The Unseen. Portraits of people who felt erased by the ones who should have held them closest. Rachel exhaled. That's beautiful. I want you to be the first one, Chloe said. Rachel laughed softly. Me? You see everyone, Chloe replied. You hold broken people together for a living, but I don't think anyone's ever asked what you're holding inside. Rachel looked at her daughter then, truly looked, and saw someone extraordinary. Not because she'd been hurt, but because she had chosen, again and again, to love anyway, to make something out of silence, to speak through images where words failed. In the months that followed, Chloe's project grew. Her work was featured in a local exhibit. Rachel, in her quiet pride, stood in the back of the gallery and watched strangers cry in front of her daughter's photos. Amanda showed up too, with Bella, and she apologized again, this time not with excuses, but with presence. Not everyone came around, but that was okay, because Chloe had learned what Rachel had taken 3 decades to understand. Family isn't just who you're born to, it's who sees you, chooses you, and refuses to let you disappear. How did this story make you feel? Which part of Rachel and Chloe's journey stayed with you the most? Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. Let us know where you're watching from. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and thank you for supporting Life Stories.